call this meeting of our Fire Community Stakeholders Committee meeting to order. Just a couple of things before we get started. This evening we will take a scheduled break at 8 p.m. Make sure everybody has the opportunity. And we will try to, depending on how the conversation goes, if not before, try to adjourn by 9 o'clock. Last time to cut the cool off of us, and based on how hot it is outside, it'd probably get pretty warm in here pretty quick once that happens. So we'll do that. But we'll call the meeting to order, and the first item of business is approval of the minutes from the last meeting. Should have all received a copy of those. Any changes, additions, or a motion to approve?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, we have a motion. Second?
Second.
All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. I believe that our only item on the agenda this evening is to begin a discussion relative to contract issues. Just a couple of things before we start is that Jeff Crook, our attorney, has provided me with or us with a list of issues for consideration. This is not what is necessarily going into the contract. This is just a whole lot of items that we can talk about and consider. If we get consensus and agreement on all of them that it's a good thing, it probably ought to be in there. We'll move to the next item, and then if there's some heartburn or some hot buttons on that, we'll talk about it, and we'll refer it further up to legal if that's the case. I will let you know right off the bat that I'm not an attorney. I don't profess to be. And there'll certainly be some terms or some items of discussion on here that I will not be able to carry through on. We do have, as Jerry Clower said, our experts or our chauffeur on the back row, Curtis T. and Jeff Yates. There's a number of items in here that they're going to help me with. Stoney certainly here, but believe it or not, we have Mr. James Allen Lee, who is an attorney, and I'm sure he can help us as well. We welcome his expertise there, and you guys probably all do too, guys and ladies. So with that, I'm going to ask Lynn, if she will, to hand out the list here, and we'll pass that around. And I don't know they're broken down into categories and then individual items in those categories, and we can sort of go down those and work through. I have one. Yeah, that's his back. Make sure they get it. Probably good.
Thank you.
One other point I did want to make is I've been talking to Jeff Crook and Ms. Cotto with regard to, I simply asked the question of what do the current contracts look like, or what are some of the contracts that we're currently operating under. And as I understand it, some of those contracts were written quite a number of years ago, so we're moving into maybe new territory where these contracts maybe become a little more sophisticated, a little more detailed, and so I think it's important that we understand that and do a real good job as a group of education with regard to the contract that we come up with. So the first area is service level standards, and we had a good presentation from Mr. Teague last time on a number of these items. Do you want to go down the list and mention each one and have any questions or comments or points made on each one of those, or do it simply by an area, or?
We should probably discuss like this response staffing requirements. Johnny was telling us, did Johnny step out?
Yeah, he'll be right back.
Okay, we're talking about that standard. Should it be a standard, should we clarify that it's with mutual aid or with automatic aid, or what, how would we go with that, Don? Is that something we need to?
I don't know how you can do that. I mean, we all strive to do the NFPA 1720. But like I said before, it requires us to have 14 people.
Yeah.
And we can't afford 14 people in every fire station.
So does that need to, if it were in the contract, would it be along with mutual aid, or it's automatic aid or mutual aid? Which one do you use?
I don't know how you can put it in the contract and expect a fire department to conform to it.
So we should leave that out?
I'm thinking we should.
Not unless you get a bank somewhere that's gonna fund something.
I mean, if you go to NFPA 20, it says the road department has to have 14 people there in 10 minutes or 19 minutes or something like that. And the way we're staffed, with even the ones that have the majority of paid staff, you would take everybody out of every department around them to meet that, and then you would still have a problem doing it. And then that would leave all those 4 or 5 or 6 departments with no one in them. So I don't think we can do that. I don't think we can strive for it, but I mean, we all do, but I don't think we can contractually do that. You got a bunch of other fire chiefs here they can talk to.
You may could do something like, instead of having it as requirements, have it, response staffing goals, and then some method of reporting how you're doing in meeting those goals. And then over a period of time, you could work to, to improve that performance. Maybe an option to that.
Well, there gonna be some, correct me if I'm wrong, but maybe the next meeting where y'all gonna meet and try to come up with what y'all doing staffing wise and report that to us for us to look at. So it might be premature to talk about what's the gut. I think it needs to be in the contract, but we don't yet know at what level or what we're shooting for, because we don't have that information yet.
And one thing he's saying that he would need 14 paid firefighters at his department, just to make sure, for example, right now he can use all the fire departments around him and all the other districts to kind of combine and make that aid agreement. But if he had to do it, if he had to write a contract that I will provide this, he would have to have 14 people on staff, which he's got how many now, Don? 2. Cost would be so not using it as the aid agreement, it would skyrocket his costs. I think that's what.
Well, it's going to skyrocket your fucking talk tonight.
When you go from 2 to 14, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what was that? Skyrocket might have been a little too down.
No, I just can't talk tonight or whatever. No, I was just thinking that if you look at the way that we're staffed today, I mean, if you have typical staffing of 4, you're not have to pull 3 departments for 1 call. And if you look at the likelihood of having multiple calls, that does happen. So now you're pulling in a 4th station. There's 18 stations total, so you're already getting what 25% roughly. You're pulling 25% out of service just for 1 call. So that's the other piece that's going through my head. Unless we as a county staff higher than 4 even. have no problem with it being a goal, but to be contractually bound to it, I think would be a costly contract item.
I think Mr. Lee's correct. I think you have to have some kind of performance standard in a contract. So I think waiting and getting your staffing model and some discussion of what the detail of that performance standard is probably a very valid point. Because to try to jump off at this point and set a standard for that discussion, I think you're getting ahead of I think you as a group would maybe getting a little step ahead on that process. But I think that at this point, the concept of having some kind of performance standard in the contract is probably what the discussion point should be now. Exactly what that standard is probably comes a little bit later when we've had some time to digest the staffing model, as well as some other discussion about those components.
Staffing is just one point of performance, some of the other.
Right, and that's what I'm saying, there's a lot of components to it, so before, getting ahead and talking about what that standard is today is probably not, that'd be very fruitful without having some framework for it. But having, agreeing that there needs to be some kind of performance standard in the contract is probably where you're at today.
It'll be the way the departments are located in proximity and everything. It's going to be hard to have that same staffing for every fire department. Ask the chiefs. I mean, I don't know. I mean, to me, that would be great if you could do it, but I don't think you could. Bill, Steve, could y'all pick 14 on? Or Donnie said he couldn't do it. Jackson, he's not here tonight. I think these smaller departments will have. Not that it wouldn't be great to have that. That would be wonderful. Just come up with the money to pay for it. That's all you got to do.
Yeah, that right there, that'd be half of my department, volunteers and all. And if you ain't gonna get half at one call at one time, that's just don't happen. Small or little, it don't. So that's
I'm not against a benchmark of something, but I think each department is, I don't think you have the same benchmark for every department.
There's a couple of things you could do there. You could do, you could have a minimum, a minimum goal that's across the county that every department would strive to meet as far as response times and personnel on that initial response. What we refer to in the fire service as an effective response force. So we could have a minimum countywide, and then you could look at, based on population density or call volume or whatever, you may have areas that you want that increased. And we actually do that in Monroe. With our 5 stations, we've actually got a different response time goal in 2 of the areas that are more rural. Just simply because of the travel distance there. So that's an option that could be looked at as well.
To clarify from last week, just to go to your point, whenever you're talking about 1720 standard, basically for the rural areas, you're talking about being able to have 6 personnel on scene within 14 minutes, 80% of the time. In a suburban area, it is 10 personnel within 10 minutes, again at 80% of the time. And for an urban area, it's 15 people within 9 minutes, and that's at 90% of the time. Just to try to put it in perspective what we're actually talking about.
That's kind of that breakdown of what I was talking about. And I doubt there's any areas that hit the urban criteria.
Yes, sir.
There are.
There are.
Okay.
Stoney, only, if we're talking about writing a contract, would I be wrong to assume that in a contract, for a countywide contract, what you would do would be establish a basic minimum for the entire county? And then if the more urban departments wanted to exceed that, it would be well within their right to be able to do that. I mean, am I wrong to assume that, or is that?
And even the rule, you know, if they had more volunteers,
If they
everybody.
wanted to
yeah.
exceed the minimum, then, I mean,
So, like, Don, you're in a suburban, were you being a suburban or rural?
Basically, it's really more rural than it is suburban, but I think we need to look more at, requirements of the North Carolina Department of Insurance, which is 4 personnel on the engine.
Yeah.
Each
Would
department
that
should
make
be
more
able to
sense,
do-
wouldn't that make more sense, Curtis, with, I mean, because I think the problem, again, is how do you know if your mutual aid's gonna show up?
Yeah.
And you're under contract to do something that you have no control
That's what it boils down to.
of. So you would rather go with the insurance standards on the minimum performance?
Which we have to meet now.
Yeah.
I mean,
exactly.
so if you got 4 people, you just got a staff of 4 minimum,
Hmm.
and you got an engine, and your neighbor, your automatic aid station has a staff of 4 minimum, they could at least send 2, that'd give you 6, which would, your 4 would meet your North Carolina requirements, and then the 2, then the mutual aid or automatic aid station is sending would meet, as long as you're in rural, would meet the, 70/20. You can meet it, but you can't contractually say you're going to.
Right. Because you're signing your contract, Robert's signing his contract.
Well, our board of directors signed.
Well, yeah, you know what I mean. Yeah, I mean, each individual fire department signing their own contract, so you can't really bind,
That's right.
you can't bind another fire department.
And with the staffing plan that we're looking at, you know, we can make it work like that. It's just several of the departments would have more than 4 because of their call volume. And, you know, we couldn't do that. The rural station then would have the requirements for North Carolina Department of Insurance on staff. So we wouldn't have the problems we have now with 2 or 3 people showing up, and then you can't get, during the daytime, you're gonna get 2 from this station and 2 from this station. You know, we wouldn't have those issues anymore.
Pam?
Quick question. Currently, there are 3 contracts per department. Am I correct? A fire, EMS, and automatic aid?
There's an automatic aid agreement that's signed by the departments, and there's a contract for fire protection.
And then there's a EMS, right?
EMS,
And that's with the,
first responder was added to the fire.
That's what the hospital, that's what the hospital,
Huh?
that's what the hospital.
it's with the hospital, yeah. So there's basically 3 contracts that each department has with the county, right?
We have one with the hospital, the ones with the
Well, I guess I'm categorizing them as the county, but a county entity. So is this contract going to alleviate the automatic aid agreement? So it'll still be in place as well, in addition, so we're not gonna combine the 2. It'll still be 2 different contracts. That's my question.
Could be 2, could be 1, it could be both.
But there has to be 2 different contracts because the state requires the automatic aid agreement to be signed as a separate document.
I don't want to be elementary. I don't want to read, I'm not going to read each one of these bullet points under service level standards. But I certainly want to give us enough time to discuss all these in detail or alleviate any concerns by anyone on the committee with regard to any one of those bullet points. So
The training requirements and the automatic aid, so those things would be, I mean, you're already required to do those under the standards from the insurance and the,
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask. I guess, what are we trying to do with this list? Because as I look down this list, and Curtis can jump in at any time, you know, vehicle and equipment requirements, we're already meeting that from the state. Staffing requirements, you know, that's part of that state deal. Automatic aid agreements are done, training requirements are part of the state. Hydrant testing requirements are part of the state. Dispatch protocols, public and community education plans, health and safety policy requirements, medical first responder requirements. I mean, all of that, for the most part, is already in place.
when you say in place, meaning?
Yeah, if we're gonna use the state Department of Insurance as a minimum, which is what Don was talking about with the 4 people in an inch cone, I mean, there's already a minimum training requirement, there's a minimum hydrant testing requirement, there's a, you know what I'm saying, it's all part of
So
that
that'd be
inspection.
redundant to mention that again if you had that. Okay.
so maybe just put a line over all that insurance, meet state insurance requirements.
And I think you need to put that into the contract, say, if we're gonna use that as the baseline, that needs to be in here, so you have an agreement with the county
Right,
that you can enforce against,
right.
and vice versa, so they know what the expectations are. Now, you can have greater or lesser
Right.
requirements in there.
So you're in
But you just-
basically you'd be in violation of contract if you didn't meet those state
That's
insurance
right.
requirements.
And it can be that simple for all of these things, you know, the state, whatever that criteria is, you know, the county saying you have to meet those requirements. It can be that easy, but it ought to be addressed in the contract. Now, I don't think medical first responder requirements, I thought that was separate from what we were talking about with the fire, but.
Yeah, that's us, medical first responder, EMS or transport would be the hospital.
Okay, so
So,
that's.
yeah, medical first
It's gonna be in there.
Yeah. And the state doesn't have the requirements for that, so that would be something, well, everybody's credentialed to the state.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's true. So there is a requirement already in place for medical first responder.
So maybe the discussion is, are those state standards sufficient? Does the county want something more, does the county want something less? That's,
Question I'd like to ask, are those state standards being met by all the departments?
Just non-S state, non-S requirements are.
I would think that some of them aren't.
And they're not current.
How many, 2?
No, sir. Beaver Lane, Wingate, Stack Road, Bakers are not meeting current non-S requirements.
For what reason?
Are you talking about State Road?
Or not Stack Road,
Crossroads.
Allen's Crossroads, I'm
Alice
sorry.
Crossroad, what you just got under that.
Is that the group that was on the probation from last year, and when does that year up?
It depends on if they,
Been submitting?
yeah, if they've been submitting the paperwork like they're supposed to have been.
And I think all of them were for people in an engine company, right?
No,
No, it's a combination of the minimum response of 4 people on their in-district responses. A number of Chiefs 101 issues, those at this point I think have been resolved. And, was there?
contractual issue that
Yeah,
we'll go through now.
also a contractual issue.
Mhm.
Okay. So Chief 101 is just a training class that all the fire chiefs are required to have within a year of the time they get the job. And so, I'm assuming, like you said, most of those have been addressed.
It has been.
And I know a couple of those were staffing. So that's why they're not meeting.
So I agree, like the question should be is North Carolina Department of Insurance 9S the minimum that we're looking for? That's the question we gotta ask and answer, I guess. And then when we talk about bullet number 2, insurance rating standards, maintenance or attain of 6, transition 10 to 9s, you know, I think you gotta leave that up to each individual district, because Unionville's got some 10, but there ain't nothing there. It's just open land, so what's the point in spending money to build a fire station to get rid of the 10? That's one house, isn't it? Yeah, it's only one house. So you're gonna have to build a fire station to correct that problem. So does that make sense to save one person $100 on their house insurance for a year to build a fire station? You know, that's a tough thing to say, that we're gonna say everybody's gonna transition to a 6. We're gonna get rid of the 10 and get it to a 9S. May not make sense. You know, so-
Maybe we use a percentile, like a 90% or 95% or whatever. Would that work?
I'll put it in there.
Yeah, I think that makes it pretty difficult.
Yeah, I mean, I've got areas that it's feasible, it's just not feasible.
Right.
I mean, I've got 2 areas, so for me to do it in my district, I'd have to build 2 stations because I'm opposite corners.
But if you had 20% of your district or 10% of your district that wasn't covered, would that justify the cost? And should we try to do that? I mean, you know, that would be what would be you should try. I mean,
Yeah, but, you know,
Cause what
I don't
happens
know of
when-
any place in the county where it's gonna be 10% of your district that's that way.
And like I said, I mean, it's up to him. If it's worth him and his district to spend the money to build another fire station, like I said, I mean, if you really look at it, I don't remember what the house is on the state website, it's like $100 a year that he's gonna save on his homeowner's insurance. You know, so I think you gotta let each district make that decision, and if we dictate that in the contract, and I think we would be opening that up to cause a lot of unnecessary expenditures to try to create something that's not a problem now, or fix something that's not a problem now.
Hey, if you buy a building in an area that's a 10 now, you know you're doing that. I say that as a rural homeowner in Allen's Crossroads District. I mean, that's where I live. I made that choice when I did it. I knew what, you know, now I'm not in a 10, I'm actually relatively close to the fire department. But that's a choice you make. And the 6, I think that's a good goal, but I don't know that that's what we want to put in to a contract that says, hey, we want everybody in the suburban area to be a 6.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. If Allen's Crossroads decided to go for a 6 and you were in that, you know, 10 area, and they said, we're gonna get you to a 6, and they told you what it was gonna cost you to get to a 6 and what you were gonna save, you'd probably say,
I go buy mine. Tanker trucks it up.
you know, I think that's what I'm saying, is not everybody wants to be a 6, not everybody needs to be a 6. You know, and I'm talking about from a community standpoint.
Well, the 6 could probably be, unless it's because of distance, should be able to pretty well be obtained countywide, unless it's beyond the.
I agree, but let's don't write that in the contract, is what I'm saying. I mean, I don't know that that's necessarily needs to be written in there. That can be a goal. And then definitely, I don't think a 10 to a 9S needs to be in
I mean, could you have to say, everybody wants to be a 9S except for distance? You understand what I'm saying? If you're a 10 because of
there.
distance.
We are now.
Okay, we are now.
We are now. And that's the reality of it, is 10 is all distance, and that's why it's 10.
And we've got a couple that are on probation on the 9S or the 9, whatever that level is.
So
It seems like a floor to me.
what would make somebody go to a 10? Like if what are you at now?
I'm a 9S.
So you're 9S. What would it take to make you go to a 10 in your whole district?
My whole district.
Yeah.
Me
Okay.
flunk some,
You couldn't do it.
Me not have enough people, me not have the right training records, me not do my job.
Okay, so that, you get what I'm saying, we want to be a 9S at least, but, and we know we can't get to 10 on something, so maybe, but he could go to a 10 if he didn't do, our fire department could
But
go to.
if he's meeting the training requirements under 9S, if he's meeting staffing requirements, if he's meeting the training requirements,
He'll
all
be a
those
9S.
things, then he'll be a 9S.
He'll be a 9S, okay.
It's
So if he's meeting all these other things, he'll be a
Right.
9S,
Yeah.
except for his 5 mile plus.
Yeah, right, distance.
That answers that, right?
I
And
think,
that all gets back into the insurance requirements.
Yeah.
looking at Allen's Crossroads, they could go to a 10 if they're not careful in the situation they're in right now, from the information I'm getting.
Yeah, but if they're meeting these other things, they won't go to a team. Is what we're talking about in contracts,
All right.
if that makes sense. So if they were meeting their staffing requirements, and they were meeting those things, then they wouldn't go to a team, right?
I mean, 9S is a fairly easy thing to meet.
So I was getting ready to say one.
Even an 8, I mean, an 8's fairly easy to meet. It's not,
And
it's just money.
Mr. Rigoli's right, we're a 9E, because we have the 9S is within 5 miles, and then the 9E out to 6 miles. Everything beyond 6 miles is to 10. So no matter what you do in that 5 to 6 mile, you'll always be a 9E. It doesn't matter what it is, if you got hydrants there or whatever, just because of travel distance. So, and he sent out maps showing all of the 9Es and the
Yes, sir.
and the 10 areas. And if you looked at those 10 areas, you know, like I said, Unionville's got one house in that whole area, 10 they got in the middle there.
So I'm actually insurance provider rated as a 6 in Allen's Crossroads District. I mean, I'll say that probably telling on
I have
that.
to call the insurance commissioner and let him know you've been getting wrong.
Just
got a
feel right.
That's my duty.
I got a hydrant less than 1,000 feet away. And I have a fire truck just in case.
If I could.
Yeah, sure, Ron.
I know we're kind of jumping around, but one thing on the training requirements, one thing I think we really need to look at, and the state's training requirements are very, very, very minimal. And there's actually no firefighter certification requirements in North Carolina, so it's a voluntary certification program. What I'd like to see us do as a county is, especially with the paid staffing, that we establish the minimum certification requirements for them. Now, I know it's really tough to put that requirement on a volunteer, but if it's a paid staff member that we're paying with county tax dollars or fee money or whatever it is, I really think we need to establish those minimum certification requirements for them, for the paid staff. And the state has a program, you know, firefighter certification program, and I think that would be the level that we would.
I thought that one of the problems was the training requirements on the volunteers. Isn't that what we've heard? I mean,
It
so-
is. It is.
It is, and that's what I said, I didn't say the volunteers, I said the
Paid staff.
paid staff.
No, but I mean, the volunteers have to go through some training. I mean, isn't that where it's getting hard to do? Isn't that where it's getting hard to recruit volunteers because they have to spend so many hours training?
Yes.
Or they don't have training requirements?
They do.
They do,
They
yeah,
do.
36 hours.
They do, yeah, it's
They use.
36 hours a year.
But not, like a professional firefighter would have much more.
No.
And that,
So, no professional has the same amount from a state requirement. What Ron's talking about is there is a firefighter certification. So if you have paid people in my department, the 4 that are paid shouldn't be employed if they're not at least firefighter certified. And there's a couple other certifications that we specifically require as well,
but everybody who shows up to get your required has to be certified, right?
everybody that shows up on the fire scene is on.
Yeah.
No, they don't have to be firefighter certified. The guy directing traffic doesn't need to be certified. The guy that's running the truck doesn't necessarily be certified.
Do they count towards your people?
Absolutely.
But Bill, what you were saying is you require your firefighters to meet
Our pay.
those certifications.
Yes.
And I think most of the
And-
departments that are utilizing paid people have, it's It may not be the same minimum standards in all of them, but all of them have minimum standards.
Yeah, it's close.
So that'd be simple enough to establish.
Yeah.
With some given timelines for those that, you know, if I have 3 that are close, then we want to give them,
Oh, of course.
you know, obviously some time to meet them.
Okay, Johnny indicated that we pretty much are covering all of these.
Yeah, I think just a 9E or 9S, whichever you want to talk about, 9S requirement covers just about all of that.
And
As a minimum.
And did that cover the bullet point on the insurance rating standards? The 9S, there was some question about, for instance, the ones that were on probation.
If you meet all the state standards, all of us in the county will get a 9S. We have a 9S now, at least. Some of them.
Where I was going with that, there was a couple that were mentioned that were on probation.
As soon as
They couldn't sign a contract with the county if they were on probation, but that's an issue of,
Most of it's paperwork. I think there's one of them, 2 of them, and some other issue.
Jeff Yates, yes.
I just have a question, quick question, more for these guys. So, in your envisioning, setting that 9S standard or whatever that standard will be, if the commission decides that they want to have a higher standard than that, then there should be some flexibility for them essentially to buy up that standard. Because what I'm hearing is it's resources intensive in a lot of cases, but there may be a commission in the future, or this commission may at some point decide they want everybody in the county to be at 6, and are willing to invest the dollars to do so. So, I think there has to be some flexibility in the individual contracts to set that standard based on the setting of the VFD, whether it's rural, suburban, urban, however you want to phrase it. But I think the commission has to have some flexibility in those contracts to set that standard, such that if they're willing to invest the funds, the county funds to do so, then that's a policy decision the commission should make or can make in its policies, making, setting as providing fire service for the county through the contracts. So I think that, you know, I guess my question is, how do you leave some of that flexibility, or how do you address that? Do you take that on individually in each contract to set the
Incentive funding? Do an incentive funding in the contract?
Yeah, because it's gonna take different things in different departments. I mean, some people already probably have what they need to go to a 6. Some people don't.
Right.
And they don't really require what it would take to go to a 6 for their area right now. So, I mean, it's a matter of pumping water, is what it, moving water.
Well, that's what I was saying, so if we wanna require the 6, then the requirement would be that there be hydrants throughout the county.
Yeah, that's fine.
That would be.
It's easy to get a 6 in.
One of the big requirements in the rural areas to get a 6 is the water haul. You gotta maintain 250 gallon a minute for 2 hours. It's attainable, but I mean, it takes more than one department to do that.
And I still think that, you know, from a policy standpoint, it would be difficult to come out and say that, you know, because I think it's still the people making the investment in that area that's gonna get the return. They have to decide if that investment that they want to make is, or the return is worth the investment. And I think that's where we're at right now. So if you looked at some of the fire departments, you know, that might require 2 trucks, you know, is it worth doing that now to save the money that they're gonna save in those areas? I think that's the question that has to come from the people who live there. And that's, you know, if Alex Crossroads, if, you know, they decide they want to be a 6, this is what it's gonna cost us to do that, well, those are the folks that are payable. And I think that decision needs to be made to me.
But I don't think that with the majority of the departments maxed out the $100 under a fire fee structure, that decision's not at the local level, that decision's at the commission level, because it's gonna take supplementary funding from the county under the current funding structure to do that.
That's
So-
assuming that we're still in the current funding structure though.
Right, but in any version of that funding structure, it's gonna take resources to do that, and that's gonna be at the commission level. The county commission's representative of those taxpayers, ratepayers, whichever district you're in. So, I think the contracts have to leave open some standard for the commission and the county to make, to negotiate that standard based on the individualized district. I don't know if you can.
What would the term of the contract be? What do you envision the term of the contract be?
I think you're probably looking at something with five years with probably some kind of renewable, 5-year renewable options or something like that. That's how we normally would do it. I can't remember what what's the EMS contract, Curtis, do you remember?
3 years.
Is it 3 years
No renewals.
with no renewals?
No renewals.
So, there's always gonna be termination clauses, and those are non-negotiable for the county. So, I'm trying to figure out, because I think you're right, I don't think you can set a standard universally for everyone, but I think the commission may wanna buy more service in certain areas.
Right, and I think my thought process to that is, then that's just an amendment or a change to the contract in that area. That's kind of the way I envision it, if the terms of a 1-year contract with a 30-day notification, which is what it is now, and then it automatically renews from now on every year without one or the other saying we're out, then, at the end of that 1 year or 2-year contract, whatever it's gonna be, if they want to renegotiate those terms, then it's up to them at that point, I would think. And again, I think in the past, there's been some amendments that come out in the middle. That's always an option. If they were to go to Allen's Crossroads and build a big old housing development right in the middle, that may require a change to the contract. It may require a change to the service levels and everything else, so you would have to do an amendment or something in the middle of the contract.
That's the only thing I'd add to what Jeff's saying, if the commission does want to, as you say, buy additional coverage in a certain area, there's going to have to be some objective means to decide where that is. Whether it's population density or whatever. If you don't, then you just say, well, let's do better here and not there, and there's going to be some. That may be what you're thinking about, I don't know.
I'd have to ask commissioners what goes through their mind, but, I think that the commission has in the contract, and I know this is what Jeff Crook would tell you, is the commission ultimately has to have some ability to adjust that service level based on their policy position of what level of service they want to provide in certain parts of the county, throughout the entire county, in higher density areas of the county. It's no different than your city. The council would make a decision as to how you staff, if you want to staff 4 on a unit, if, how they do that to provide service within that area. The commission ultimately has to decide, and John, you're probably right, it probably is going to have to be some form of amendment that goes into that, but I think trying to set that universal, I think template language is one thing, setting a universal standard for every fire department, maybe a little bit of a challenge based on that aspect of it, so.
Okay, anything else on service level standards? Comments, questions? Okay, what about service level data reporting requirements?
What is being done now? Monthly, semi-annually,
Quarterly,
quarterly?
and OSFM's wanting us to move to a monthly reporting.
And when we get the new reporting stuff online, it won't be as hard.
We got
It won't be impossible.
I have been trying to decipher what Kevin sent me, and I'm gaining headway here on the spreadsheets and everything. But I've still got Allen's Crossroads at 3 years with no reports in that data.
That's what I've got.
Yeah.
I can't put it on there if I don't have it.
Right, so-
If you need help deciphering, you got my numbers, call me.
Yeah, so it's been a problem. I don't know when it became a problem, when it was dropped, and it used to be, and I think you'll see it's a requirement too, that monthly and yearly reported. I brought this up to the fire commission. And I don't see it as being a huge problem, especially this day and age in the computer, where you do your monthly, I know all the fire departments keep a daily log, monthly log of what their activities are.
Well, I wouldn't say it's impossible, and we've had
And
challenges
then-
with our current.
Not every fire department does, Bill.
They what, they don't do
Not
it?
every fire department does.
Right, I mean, we've had challenges
Yeah.
though with our central.
Well,
and the
if
fact
that's new to me, because every fire department I've ever been associated with, even back in the days, they kept monthly and yearly run sheets, a log. I mean, I don't know what the city does as far as, you know, keeping track of what they do. If you don't know the activity of the department, how can you come up with trends, or how can you look at a budget and not know the activity of the department? I mean,
That's what you like to ask those individual fire chiefs.
it used to be a requirement. Matter of fact, it's still a requirement.
Still a requirement, but
It hasn't been.
if I don't have it, I can't.
No, I'm not saying you, but.
And I think that's what this bullet point in this contract's talking about, ensuring that if you're not a direct report to the state, that you are in fact actually reporting to the fire marshal's office.
So we should
Now, with the
provide
new-
monthly reports?
With the new system, that should be a fairly easy goal accomplished.
The new system, when does that come on?
It's in legal now.
So I'm sorry, but, so what are we gonna, I need to play the other side of it, because we've had this problem for 6 months. We had the link between the CAD and the Fire Central down. Put an enormous burden on people that have to enter in reports. How are we gonna handle that?
If that's the case and we've got that issue, then we recognize it and we
No, my point.
communicate with you and the staff to make
Right,
sure that
but if
nobody's
I'm
in the fire.
contractually bound, you know, I guess I feel like we're getting down to the nuts and bolts of a lot of this as we're talking through it. And, you know, at a high level, I don't have a problem with that, with the reporting requirements. It makes sense.
Well, I think,
And, hold on a second, I guess what I'm concerned about is listening to the way the conversation's going. If it's contractually bound and we have problems, obviously there's got to be caveats then for those things. So, you know, it does take an inordinate amount of time if those links aren't there. And what are we gonna do when now the centralized data, reporting is down? I mean,
We just figure it out and get through it together. I mean,
Well, is it our fault that the reporting's down, or?
Yes.
it's just,
Then that would be our fault.
yes, no,
I'm
it's,
sorry, yes, it is.
it's just a terrible system, yes, sir, that we're trying
So
to
we're going to
fix.
a new system,
We
right?
are, yes, sir.
So the new system should be better.
Should be.
But if it's our fault, then if it's our fault, that would be your fault in the contract,
Well,
right?
Jeff had a point, and then Butch wanted to say something.
the way that that's handled, that's okay, and IT reports to me. So the way that that's handled is you have a 30-day cure period or some kind of cure period in your contract. And what it says is that we will have a cure, and at that point, once it's recognized, whatever side of the house it's on, then you have a chance to cure that. It's not like we're waiting on the 31st day to say, you haven't submitted your data because we turned off the system on you, we're closing the doors and not giving you any more money. I mean, the way that it works with EMS, and we have a similar type of agreement with EMS on data and the CAD system and everything else, is that there's a cure period. So if it's on our side, it gives us a chance to acquire, fix the problem. If it's on the EMS side, or it gives them a chance to figure out and fix the problem. It's not a gotcha, it's just an insurance that everybody in the sandbox is gonna play nice together. It's kind of a good fences, make good neighbors approach. So I think that in the contract, any contract we have, where we had a technical standard for reporting like that, and it was based on a system, it would have a cure period that says, if you're not reporting, we get to the reason why. And if it's a technical reason, then we all agree that we're gonna work and fix that, and nobody's gonna be penalized. If it's a lack of reporting because you're not reporting, that's a different situation. Not that that would be the case, but that's what you're really contracting against, is failure to report under normal conditions. But if there's a problem with the system, then there's a cure period that would go into effect, and everybody work together to try to cure that. So that's kind of how the approach with the EMS contract works, and I would expect that this would be similar in that vein.
Kevin, you mentioned, have you seen the new method, and
Yes, sir.
do you think it's better?
I do, yes, sir.
Okay, all right.
And we've also been to other agencies that we've modeled ourselves after. Forsyth County, North Carolina's a good one, where they've got instant reporting, that all the volunteer fire departments use, and the county is really the one that pays for it, and they've got user groups that contribute to, this is the way we want to see reports, some of the things that we see, some of the information that's put out there. So it's working well there. It's the same software that when I worked with Monroe, that we turned upside down, inside out for about, 3.5 years before we decided to make that investment. So I put, not here in Union County, but when I worked in Monroe, I put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into making sure that was a good system. And when I heard that Union County was thinking about it when I came on board here, because Hemi Bridge had it, Stallings had it, Bakers had it, we already had folks in the county that were using it. So instead of making all these folks reinvent the wheel with pulling something else, we decided that would be the package that we would use. So yes, sir, I do think that it'll be better.
I know you said you hoped it would be better, so I was a little leery about that.
Well, you've always got to throw that little caveat in case something doesn't work just right. But yes, sir, I do believe that it's going to cure a good bit of our problems. And the advantage that it's going to give me in my office is that we are going to be able, because we're on a cloud server now, we're going to be able to go in, and when Hemi Bridge clears a house fire at 2 o'clock in the morning, when we get done with our investigation and we hit the office at 8 a.m. that next morning, we're going to be able to go in. Hemi Bridge's guys have filled in some of the base stuff. My staff's going to be able to go in and fill out all the investigative portions, so that when that insurance company needs that report at 10 o'clock that morning, we can go in there and give it to them so they can start the claims process for that customer. And we've not been able to do that in the past. So not only is it going to help us from what we do for reporting, for information, for long-range planning, I really do feel like it's going to deliver better customer service than we've been able to in the past.
Are you doing it on a monthly deal now or quarterly?
No, sir, we're doing quarterly, and we're moving to the monthly now. But speaking to Chief Knup's concern, we've already talked to Shirley Lofton at OSFM, and we're not going to submit, a good example, June right now, we're not going to be submitting the June reports on the last day of June. We won't submit the June reports until probably August, because we need time to make sure there aren't any incident errors. We need to make sure that there's not a glitch in the system somewhere, so that cure time that Mr. Yates speaks of, that we don't run into those issues. So our submittal to the state, yes, we'll submit monthly, but we'll be about 60 days behind, and we're okay. We've gotten the thumbs up from them with that being our plan. And that's not unique or unusual.
Can I assume that the content of these reports are fairly standard would be for every department?
Yes, sir.
So it sounds like with the new software and everything, that the frequency, content, and method would be simple enough. Okay. Next item is other general record and bookkeeping requirements. I know one of these items here is identification of assets purchased with county funding, and I'll put Jeff on the spot and respond a little bit about to maybe to this item in terms of capital items purchased with county dollars, et cetera, et cetera. So,
Well, I think the discussion, given presently what's going on in other parts of the county, that all the contracts should have what happens in the event that the fire department's dissolved or dissolves itself. And I think the identification of assets purchased with tax dollars or county revenue should revert back to the county. I think there's a point later in the list that would basically say, I think that the concept is that if the fire department goes out of business in the county, or the taxes have paid for those assets, or those trucks, in this case, that those should revert back to the county. Because in that event, if the VFD goes away, the county will probably have some vested interest in ensuring fire service in that area and requiring the assets to be able to do that. But that's only in the advent, that's only identified in the advent that the VFD is dissolved or goes away in some form or fashion. So I think that that's kind of the intent, is to understand what assets at the fire departments are purchased with those tax dollars.
I think it would be safe to say that all the assets are purchased with county dollars. I mean, I'm not being facetious when I say that, but I mean,
Well, I think it varies
how?
in some cases. If you have, for instance, there may be departments that do, there are some fundraising departments still out there. And they get money from towns, from other contracts. So, you know, there are departments that have other revenue sources besides the county. There are some that have the vast majority, obviously. So I think that there's some discussion that has to occur about if the VFD goes away, what happens to those assets that were paid for with the public dollar?
That is in direct conflict with what the federal government told me I had to put in my bylaws if we went up, or if we go away. We have to, all the fire departments in the county are chartered as nonprofit organizations.
Right.
Therefore, if a fire department ceases to exist, my charter says that all the assets that belong to that fire department have to be given to another fire department. They can't be given back to the county. I can't take them, the board of directors can't take them. We can't give them to anything other than another nonprofit organization.
The county is a nonprofit organization.
You chartered as one?
I'm fairly certain that we could, based on what our attorneys have given us guidance on, we could retain ownership of that equipment. Or you could transfer it to another fire department that we're gonna contract with.
We could do
In
that.
that case. But I think what it is understanding what assets you have on site.
But we
Or
can't
funded that
just
way.
come out and say we're gonna give it to the county, because, I mean, we can give it to another fire department, but we can't give it to a governmental agency.
And I didn't say it had to be the county that got it. I think that the county has a vested interest in knowing where those assets are gonna go and what's gonna happen to them. That's why keeping an inventory of what's purchased with tax dollars versus not is kind of a critical component.
But just about everything we purchase is with some form of tax dollars. So, you know, and most of it have a pretty good listing of what we have.
Pam, do you have a comment?
Well, I was just gonna ask you, you said, equipment that we own, but if it's bought with taxpayer dollars, who owns it? I mean, if you go to a fundraiser, for instance, and you buy your TVs in the training rooms, or your furniture, or whatever, I would say that would be owned, right? I mean, that's pretty clear. You worked for it, you got the donation, you bought it, you own it. If the county, and I'm not making a judgment call, I'm asking a question.
We need to ask that guy.
So if.
I'm not a nonprofit expert. But I think what
But you
the
see the
county, I
difference
think what
what
the
I'm
county's
asking?
vested interest in my opinion, is to make sure that assets that tax dollars are gonna pay for stay to fight fires in there. And I think this can work, how we're talking about, because as you say, in almost any nonprofit that's set up, upon dissolution, it's gonna be paid to another, and what it needs to do, I think, in the contract, make sure that everyone says that it's gonna be used for, you know, another nonprofit organization that is gonna fight fires or provide fire protection in that district, in
Or
that
in,
area.
or in Union County even.
Or in Union County, and I think it's a question to be opened up whether or not that can be the county, because you know, if the county's providing that service, I'm not necessarily saying it can't be, I don't know the answer to that question.
And the answer to your question is the VFDs own the fire trucks. At this point, under the current structure, the VFDs would own it, and I don't see any reason why the county would change that. So, whether we fund it or not, the VFDs would retain ownership.
Curtis, did you have one, want to make one?
Just a quick comment, that's done in a number of counties around the state right now. And the biggest reason why it's been put in place in those counties is because in certain situations, you had fire departments, and whenever they went out of business for whatever reason, they had away trucks all over the country. Instead of returning them to the areas where they were providing protection, So the people that paid for them in those districts had to turn around and somehow or another pay for trucks. And that's what the concept is to try to look after the investment of the taxpayers in each fire district.
And depending upon depending upon the funding structure, and how you use your tax district structure, they may need to stay within that specific tax district where those tax dollars are collected that funded that truck. It depends on the funding structure.
Depends on the district, right? How it's set
How
up in the
the
tax
district is established, if you know, so, because there is a clear bright line that says tax dollars raised in the district should remain in that district. The equipment, depending upon the depreciated value and the useful, it's a little bit of kind of a discussion at that point as to how it plays out. But I think that the idea, and Jeff in putting it in this list, was that there is some agreement that we know what equipment was purchased with tax dollars, that upon, if the VFD dissolves, then there's some discussion about the disposition of these assets, they just don't leave the district, because the county does have a vested interest in ensuring that whoever is providing fire service in that district, those assets remain in that district to be able to fight fires. And I think that's the point. It's not that we're trying to take the equipment or do anything with it, it's just that we have a plan in the admin that the VFD decides it's no longer gonna be a VFD.
Okay, I promised you guys a break at 8 o'clock, and it's about 1 minute after, so we'll take about 10 minutes.